something just started. Help you with managing how to assess and make your determination of, or when you make your determination, how to deal with that as far as what you're doing with that variance. Of course, we're talking about a variance. We're talking about it in the Safety Code Act issue. Dictionary has its definition. Of course, we use the terms alternative solution or variance interchangeably, but a variance is what we're talking about here. So something different from the prescribed code. Now, what we use the variance for is to address something that is not foreseen in the prescriptive part of the code. So a lot of times as technology, as processes advance quicker than the code is able to accommodate them, we get presented as safety code officers or administrators with a request to do something that's not in the code, and we have to evaluate that. So we're trying to provide an alternative, something that is not foreseen, but will work under the intent of the Act and the prescriptive regulation. When we're looking at this, one of the things we're always, you're going to hear this repeated this morning is we're looking for the approximate equivalent or greater safety performance. So when you're evaluating that, it becomes a judgment call on a part of the SCO or the administrator. They have to make a judgment as to what's being proposed. Does it meet this standard or the standard that they believe is required for the prescriptive part of the code that they're going to be varying? So the Act as it currently stands gives power to the administrators and safety code officers to issue variances using that exact same wording of approximate equivalent performance. It talks about how the variance must be issued. It talks about notifying the administrator. And in that case, they're talking about sending it to the Safety Codes Council so it can be registered on the system. And then it will be provided to the Safety Code Council, looks after providing it to the appropriate technical administrator. When we use technical administrator, I should be careful. We're talking about provincial administrator in that discipline, in that technical discipline. When we look at refusals, which is now coming in, refusals and appeals of those refusals. Now, SCOs always have the option of not accepting a variance. The twist now is that that refusal of a variance by an SCO may be appealed to the council by the appellant. So the new part that's come in, so you saw the first four, now we have 5, 6, and 7, which we'll go further into detail. But it talks about how now an SCO must issue their refusal in writing, and also that they'll have to register that refusal with the council system, just as they did with an accepted variance. When we talk about variances, we're talking about 3 types of variances. So there is a site-specific, there is a jurisdiction-wide, typically within the municipal boundaries, and they're provincial-wide, which are issued by the provincial administrator for that discipline. When we go back to the previous page, you notice that only 2 of these variances are subject to an appeal, and that would be the specific variance and the jurisdiction-wide variances, which are issued by an SCO. Province-wide variances are issued by the provincial administrator for that discipline and are not subject to this appeal process. Another consideration when you're looking at evaluating a variance is you must take into account your QMP. Every jurisdiction that's accredited has a QMP, and in that, depending on the specifics of that QMP, may have specific requirements of what you as an SCO need to consider when you're going through assessing a variance and determining whether you're going to accept that variance or refuse that variance. So you have the two documents. You have the act, which provides you that authority, and you have the QMP, which may provide you additional steps that you have to take when considering and issuing or refusing a variance. In the current QMP template, this is the standard wording. It can change from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So this sets out the types of variances that are going to be allowed within that jurisdiction, talks about it being required in writing, and the requirement for the safety code officer to provide a review of the application for a variance. This part predates the change on December 1st of the Safety Code Act to include the appeals of refusals. So this part does not talk about documentation for a refusal, but it is something that you're going to have to do as part of the ability of the appellant to appeal any refusal. In red, you'll see there, I talk about, the SCO talks about thoroughly researching the subject matter. So when an application comes into you, and you'll hear this themed a couple of times, we're looking for the safety code officer to do their due diligence in researching the application for a variance. And this due diligence, this thorough research, realistically has to be documented, what you did, what you looked at, how your process was, because that'll become part of the appeals, if there is one, if you happen to refuse that variance request. So once again, that requirement's there. Our advice is please thoroughly document it to support your position. So if it is appealed, there is something to substantiate your decision. So big critical thing here right at the top, a variance is not there to relax an existing code. A variance is something that is simply not foreseen within the prescriptive code, but cannot simply say that that part of the code is not applicable. And the SCOs, when issuing or considering the issue of variance, must also consider that the request is within their designation of powers to do. And this will change from SCO to SCO. The SCO is requested by an owner or their representative. So for a permit, the contractor may be the one submitting that request to any SCO. And then the SCO, open that line of communication with the applicant to ensure you get the full details of that request. Communication is critical. I'm going to be hitting on that a couple of times during this discussion this morning. It's critical that the applicant and the SCO have an open line of communication to discuss something specific like a variance request, so that each party feels that they have the adequate information to move forward. So when we look at what the applicants are seeking, they're seeking something innovative, but that also meets all of our safety requirements under the Act. And the SCOs, they're seeking to ensure that safety requirements have been maintained. In the end, we're both after to ensure safety overall. Now, as we each have roles, it does not mean we are adversaries in this process. We are working, as the applicant is to work with the SCO and the SCO to work with the applicant. So it's, not intended in any way to be an adversarial process. So the applicant's role is to submit the supporting documentation. And they have the responsibility to demonstrate that what they're proposing meets or exceeds the approximate intent of the prescriptive code. So once again, that's a judgmental call. One SCO's judgment can very well differ from another. So there's nothing written in the legislation or the regulations that state that we all have to follow the same judgment in that sense. That's going to be per SCO or per jurisdiction. As far as the SCO, like we talked about, their responsibility is to review subjectively, evaluate the request, and make a determination. And then part of that determination is there's two possible outcomes: acceptance of the variance or a written refusal of that variance. So this slide became quite wordy when we tried to make sure it was accurate. So we're talking about the administrators. There are a number of administrators throughout the province for a number of different areas within the Safety Code Act. The ones we all really know about, of course, are the provincial administrators that are responsible for the technical disciplines. So plumbing, gas, fire, building, they all have a provincial administrator that manages that technical discipline. And they have powers under Section 38 of the Act to issue variances. These variances are province-wide variances, so they're the obligation of all jurisdictions to recognize them and enforce them. There are other administrators, and some of them work for the council, such as the administrator of accreditation, the administrator of certification. Under the ministerial order granting them their powers, those administrators actually do not have the power to issue variances. There's a number of administrators from the province that do. There's a number that don't. So the administrator for storage tanks of flammable and combustible liquids does not have the authority to issue a province-wide variance. However, the provincial administrator for building does. So when you're looking at the administrators and we're talking about issuing variances or orders, we're talking about, under Section 38, we're talking about primarily the provincial administrators for the technical disciplines. Now, as we saw under Section 38 of the Act, the SCOs do have the authority to issue a variance. We consider that they have the expertise to evaluate the code and to evaluate the proposed solution to make it a determination. The SCO, if they choose to accept that variance, will issue a variance in their opinion and provide that variance in writing to both the applicant and to the appropriate administrator, which is the administrator of accreditation at the Safety Code Council, so it can be registered. Now we talk about due diligence on part of the SCO. And the administrators would follow this same due diligence when they were considering a variance as well. When you see an engineer's stamp on documents, it doesn't automatically mean that what you're looking at is compliant with the intent of the prescriptive part of the code that they're requesting a variance for. It is still your responsibility as the evaluator to look at that application and determine yourself if it meets those criteria. So that due diligence is something that should an appeal happen of a refusal, the appeal board will be looking to see what did the SCO do to make that determination that the request did not meet the standard they were looking for. So the big takeaway from this is never blindly accept a variance request. It is always incumbent upon you as the subject matter expert for that area to do your due diligence. When we talk about, the SCO also must evaluate, is this within their scope, and are they properly designated as well? So those are steps that the SCO will go through when making their evaluation of any request. So part of that evaluation is the SCO's interpretation of the intent of the code. The code is prescriptive. It's meant to specifically address a specific, each of those specifics that are within it. Now, sometimes there can be a little bit of, interpretation can arise from different parts of the code. A variance may touch on some of those things. One of the resources as an SCO you can go to is you can go and look up the intent statements for that part of the code. Now, for the building code, online, you can look up the National Building Code 2015 intent statements to assist you in determining what the intent of the authors of that part of the code were. And that can help you in your evaluation to determine if this variance request is in line with that intent. When in trying to interpret the code too, it's always a subjective matter. So different SCOs can have different interpretations of the code. It's one of those areas where human judgment comes into play. But critical factor is that the end result must support the end goal of having a safe, whatever the process or activity or product, safety is enforced. When we get to trying to determine maybe that a part of the code that may be ambiguous or open to widespread interpretation, it's possible to consult with a technical advisor for municipal affairs for that discipline. Now, the technical advisors will not approve or disapprove of a variance. They will look at a technical matter and provide advice on that. As far as making an application to the administrator for a variance, the administrators issue variances, which we call standards, or they use variances and interpretations. Those are at their discretion. They choose when one is appropriate and when one is not. So you may request one, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to provide you an interpretation or a variance on your request. That is solely at their discretion. So we've broken up the steps in how to get a variance from request to issue or refusal. The first couple of cogs are the responsibility of the applicant. The remainder become the responsibility of the issuer. And then, of course, with the refusals, there's going to be some green cogs now at the end if the applicant chooses to appeal a refused variance request. So when we look at the applicant's responsibility, it's their responsibility to identify what the alternative is they're seeking. Then they have to provide the proof, the supporting evidence for that requested or proposed alternative. And this proof has to be something substantive for the SCO to review and evaluate. And then the applicant will submit that request to the appropriate AHJ along with the supporting documentation for them to evaluate. Now we come over to the SCO. So they will accept this request for a variance and begin their evaluation process. So that evaluation process may involve many different facts. One of the big ones to reach out is collaborate with other SCOs within your organization or within your group, or other SCOs that you know that may have expertise that can assist you with evaluating this. So big importance on engaging others. You should reach out and use that widespread expertise as much as possible. Once you've gone through your evaluation, and this evaluation, as well as collaborating with others in your own organization and others outside of your organization, also open lines of communication with the applicant. Keep that open. Like if you have questions about what they submitted or you want clarification, you always have the option of giving the applicant the opportunity to help clarify or provide additional supporting documentation that you feel may be necessary to help you achieve a valid decision on that application. Once you've made that decision, you need to document and communicate those results. And once again, that becomes critical if you're refusing that request, because that documentation, that refusal, is going to be used during that appeal process to support your position for that refusal. And then you want to file that either accepted variance or the refusal for a variance with the council. Like we talked about the administrator of accreditation, they maintain the system for accepted variances, and they'll be maintaining the documentation now for any refusals to help assist if there is an appeal of that refusal. And then follow-up. This is critical when you're going to accept a variance. You want to ensure that if you've put any conditions or additional items you want to see, or anything that has to do with accepting that variance, you want to ensure that that was complied with post approving of that variance. So you can't just write the variance and walk away from it. You need to ensure that whatever they did met the standard they said they would do and the conditions you may have placed on that. And of course, now after this, we would technically look at having a ninth cog in there, and it would be more on the green shade, where if there was a refusal, now it is an option for that applicant to file an appeal for that refusal. I come back to documentation. As one of the auditors that go around, first thing we always ask for is documentation on permits, on inspections, on everything. When you're doing this, when you're following through with your process of evaluating an alternative solution, a variance, it's critical for you to document what you've done to support your position. Without that documentation, it leaves open too much speculation as to what may or may not have been your thinking process in evaluating that. So when we talk about you've reached a conclusion, whether it be an acceptance or a refusal, we need to have that decision sent to the council so it can be filed. Now, the council is not looking for the supporting documentation that the applicant sent in to request the variance. We're looking for your decision as to what you've done. So it's either an issued variance or it's a refused variance. As far as a refusal for variance, just like an issued variance, the council has a template for a variance refusal. It's available on our website. When you go to the Safety Code Council's public website, on the very first tab, when you click on it, you'll see drops down. There's a number of different options. One of them is orders, one of them is variances. When you click on the variance one, you look on that page, you'll see there's a template for an issued variance, a template for a request for variance, and now there's a template there for a refusal of a variance. To me, it's critical that you use that template to ensure that you put down the appropriate information that will be needed to document that refusal. So it's another resource for you to have on there. So we talked about this right at the beginning. As of December 1st, there were a number of changes to the Safety Code Act, specifically under Section 38 for variances. So we also mentioned that any decision by administrator is final. It's not subject to an appeal. So the provincial administrators, when they issue a variance, it's not something that the council can hear an appeal on. Now, when a safety code officer refuses a written variance, they have to be served with notice of the refusal. And the applicant who has received that, now within 30 days, may choose to appeal that to the council in accordance with our bylaws. Critical that we are looking at these timelines again. So just like under orders, there are specific timelines that have to be met if somebody wants to appeal or have an order reviewed. Same with a variance. We need those documents submitted in a timely fashion. So if there is an appeal, we can evaluate that the appeal was managed within the appropriate time frame. So when the council receives this, they're going to follow our internal process for administering an appeal, and they will provide the appropriate contacts, contact both the SCO to let them know that there has been an appeal. They'll be setting dates for that appeal to take place, and provide everyone with the appropriate notification. When you get such a notification from council that one of your refusals has been appealed, that's your opportunity to start planning ahead, making sure you have all of your documentation in order and ready to support your decision. So when the council considers an appeal, of course, they have the option of supporting or upholding that refusal, or they have the option to overturn that refusal and then would may issue that variance with any possible conditions that would be considered appropriate for that particular situation. This is a bit new to me as well. So it would not be the SCO that would have to issue the variance. The variance would come from the council and in their format that they choose, and with any terms or conditions that they determine are appropriate. So when you're considering a variance and you're leaning that you may be choosing to refuse that application, Some of your possible reasons why you may choose to refuse that are, in your opinion, that the proposal does not provide that level of safety that the prescriptive requirement of the regulation did, or that the applicant did not provide supporting evidence to give you enough information to be able to approve it, or the application was simply badly created. Or once again, it may not have fallen within your scope or the scope of the act. So anything that's outside of your jurisdiction to administer or the act's jurisdiction to administer, you would refuse that application. There may be others that we haven't foreseen. That's once again why it is incumbent upon you as the evaluating authority to look through what's sent in and make a subjective evaluation and determination. So I promised you under an hour. I think I'm at 36 minutes here. Do we have any questions?
I don't see any yet, but if anybody has any, please feel free to type them in the chat and we can answer all your questions for you.
I'm gonna actually pose one to Andrea and Sanella, just for clarification. I know I had to ask about a refusal that's been through appeal, and the appeal was successful. So they overturned the refusal, and the council is now issuing the variance. Is that correct, Andrea? Okay. So yeah, that was a new one to me. I'm not sure exactly how that process will work, but that'll be as part of that appeal board will and Andrea's team will make that figure out how to do that appropriately.
Yeah, so basically we have our tribunal who have the expertise to hear the matter, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that there's a possibility that when we get to a hearing, because we haven't gone through it ourselves, that the persons attending might present other evidence that supports maybe a change in the decision, or there might even be an agreement by the parties at the hearing. So time will tell how this all plays out, but ultimately that tribunal will have the authority to, I guess, overturn it and make suggestions on where to go from there. And then it would be up to that safety codes officer and the authority, like if it's whatever municipality, to kind of enforce and deal with that.
So we would not be asking the safety code officer to issue that variance, correct? No. Okay.
No.
Perfect. No, that was the only area that I kind of had questions on. I understood the appeal process from orders. Now variances are following pretty closely along the line with that same type of process if you've ever been involved with an appeal of an order. It's just the issuance that was a new to me, but Andrea, thank you for that clarification.
We do have a couple of questions coming in the chat. So I'll start with the first one. Tim messaged asking, the variance deals with variances. There are permit applications that do not meet code and sometimes cannot meet code. Any thoughts?
Right. So when you're talking about cannot meet code, a variance is not intended to, like we talked about right at the beginning, a variance does not eliminate the requirements in the code. It simply provides an alternative means of getting there, right? The end goal still has to be achieved. So an alternative is an applicant has come to the SCO and says, well, I know this is our end goal, and you know the code provides the straight line to it. I have a line that goes slightly to the side, but meets up at the same end goal. So it's not changing the code. It's just finding alternatives to still achieve the same goal as the code. And that's why we talked about the intent statements are always something that is an important part of your evaluation of a variance request.
Okay. From Darren, in the event that the council issues the variance, would the council then be responsible to follow up with field inspections to ensure compliance?
No, and I'll let Andrea answer that as well. But The council does not have, except for storage tanks, the council does not have field SCOs that are out doing code inspections and enforcement. That is up to the AHJ to manage within their jurisdiction. And Andrea, I think that's correct, right?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah, I mentioned that before.
Right.
Okay, from Bruce, can SCOs have access to the council variance library to determine if a similar variance has been issued or refused before as further means of research on the part of the SCO? The reasons or circumstances of the previous issuance or refusal could be helpful. This may also help with variance shopping.
Right. Now, as far as access to our library, I don't believe we have that capacity at this time. The system we use is probably long since overdue for upgrade. I know it's the goal one day to have that available, but I don't think we're close to that point yet. As far as other variances, one of the critical things to remember, though, is a variance issued by one jurisdiction is not incumbent upon another jurisdiction to accept. It is up to each jurisdiction to do their own evaluation and assessment and determination. So just because of one variance was accepted in jurisdiction A, jurisdiction B is not bound by that variance. So, you know, having those available province-wide, I don't think it's a bad thing, but it's also important to remember because you have your variance approved in one jurisdiction does not mean it's automatically approved in another. That's up to each jurisdiction to make those determinations.
Well, and don't you think that it would also, we don't have all the information, right? Like
Correct.
we're not getting supporting documentation, so it would be really hard to make a determination anyways if you had access.
Right, and that's a big part of our system is we don't have the capacity to store all of that supporting documentation. That's why we're only looking for, as the SCO, we're only looking for your determination, whether it's an acceptance or refusal. That supporting documentation can be quite document thick, and our system just is not set up to manage that type of volume.
Okay, Chris Jackson asks, what is the process to revoke an approved variance?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
The process to revoke an approved variance, what would the process be?
To revoke an approved variance. That's a good one. I haven't heard of revoking an approved variance. Now, variances are issued by, the site specific and the jurisdiction wise are issued by the authority having jurisdiction for that area. And I don't know, Andrea, we might have to do research. I would assume that if you have the authority to issue a variance in your jurisdiction, you have the authority to revoke it. But I haven't actually ever seen that done. So that's a very interesting question.
So Mark, this is Chris. Let me give you some more information on that.
Sure.
Working for an accredited corporation, there was a variance issued. Some of the terms and conditions were put in place that the variance would become null and void if new technology or new products came available on the market.
Right.
If that was to happen, like I assume that because we file the variance with the council, we'd have to, if we want to take back that variance, we'd have to do the same thing, would we not? Maybe.
I think it's more of a gray area, Chris. I don't think it's a bad thing that if you file that variance, you can file an update to it saying that due to new approved products that the variance is no longer valid.
Perfect. That's what I want to know.
And that way in our system would close. Now you got to remember the big caveat is the variances are not to be used to approve products. There is a
Correct.
specific process for that. There are agencies that deal with that. The variance process is not to be used to approve products, but if there are approved products that come on that make your variance basically moot, then I don't see a problem with submitting an update to your variance to say it's no longer in use or no longer valid.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, well.
We're getting some good questions. Simon says, we often work with applicants extensively to get to an accepted variance. I could see this new process often leading to a refusal because of mere lack of supporting documentation. How do you foresee this new process changing that working relationship with applicants?
Well, and like we said in one of the earlier slides, is this is not an adversarial process. The whole goal is to work with the applicant and the applicant to work with the SCO to ensure there's clear communication. And I know I've pounded on that word communication, but miscommunication has led to so many problems, so many misunderstandings. So if an applicant is not providing the required supporting information for you to do a proper evaluation of a request, there's no way you can approve that variance. And to me, your due diligence is to let them know, okay, what's been submitted is insufficient, or maybe you even have an idea of what you may need to evaluate this fully, and you can provide that to the applicant. Like there's nothing wrong with you working with the applicant, but if they simply are unable or unwilling to provide you with substantive documentation for you to reach a proper determination, then your only determination is a refusal.
Bruce asks, who is the appeal panel? Is it the same as the panel hearing orders? Would like to know if we're speaking to those who are familiar with the code and the act or not.
Yeah,
So I
and
can
I'll
take
let,
that one.
yeah, I'll let someone else speak to that one.
Yeah, so Bruce, it's going to be very similar process to what we do with orders. We're going to take a look at what code we're referencing within that variance request and kind of what code the variance might fall under. And we will pull from, most likely the building subcouncil, because that's where we often see the majority of our appeals. But let's say we have an intersection with, fire code or electrical code. We'll pull and we can make a kind of a combined panel of building and electrical, building and fire as needed, so that we have the proper expertise on that panel to deal with the issue.
Perfect. Thanks, Sana. Another question from Simon. Are we to formally refuse an application for variance if the applicant simply retracts the request for variance and no longer wants to pursue it?
No, because the variance is never, if they've retracted the variance, then the variance request no longer exists. So there's no need for do an official refusal.
Okay. From Tim, approvals are to be issued on acting in good faith. In the event of court action, documentation of variance approvals are just as important.
Yes, and once again, we pound on that. Documentation is so critical in other parties evaluating what happened. So if it goes to court, if it goes to appeal, they're primarily looking at those documentations to begin to make their determination of what happened with that either acceptance or refusal.
Okay. Ping asks, are there fees involved with the appeals?
Turn that over to the appeals people.
Yep. So for variance refusals, it's a $500 appeal fee.
From Wayne, can SCO's accepted variance be appealed by anyone? For example, the administrator or another person that may be affected?
An accepted variance being appealed? No, not to my knowledge. Andrea, that's not in the legislation that I've seen anywhere. So no, and Sanel and Andrea I think are in alignment with me. It's the jurisdiction that makes it. So for a site specific or a jurisdiction wide, it's the AHJ that makes the determination of acceptance of that variance through their SCO. A province wide variance is issued by the provincial administrator for that discipline. And that is not appealable in any way.
Okay, I think we might have caught up. Anybody
Excellent.
else have any questions before we? It was really, really informative. Thanks so much, Mark.
No, and to anyone out there, if I use the word so too many times or pounded the table too many, I apologize. Once again, this is our first run at doing this within an hour. So I think I went through a lot of material really quickly. I encourage, if you want more expansive, we do a 3-hour webinar on this where we do a deeper dive into a lot of the subjects that we reviewed here. And also utilize the frequently asked questions, the FAQs on our website. They may answer a lot of your questions right off the bat. But overall, thank you everybody for coming. It was really an interesting experience. Thank you, Jennifer, Andrea, and Sana for all the assistance.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, thanks, everybody. Just a reminder, you can self-report your credits via Council Connect. We will also have the recording up online within a week or two. So if you know anybody that watches the online, remind them that they can also get the credits just for watching the online video. So thanks again to Mark. Really appreciate it. And thanks to everybody for coming out. Have a great day.
Back to work, everyone.